Okay. Let's see if I can figure out. One thing is I can't scroll forward.
Oh, doing the arrows doesn't work?
Nope.
Uh-oh. Zoom. We apologize. We are
yeah, sorry.
we're on a different platform for work.
There we go. All right, here we go. All right. Okay.
Happening.
Yep. All right. Well, first off, thank you so much for sticking with us during this technology challenging moment for myself. Appreciate that. So yeah, and also for including us in these great talks. I really appreciate that, and sorry we couldn't be there in person. And I know we've been meaning to do this for a while, and I'm really glad that we have the chance. So first off, yeah, thank you, Seldovia Village Tribe, for having us. And I just wanted to do sort of a general overview of the projects that we have going on in Kachemak Bay. And so myself, I'm Michelle St. Martin. I'm with the Fish and Wildlife Service Marine Mammals Management Program. I've been there for about 10 years now. My focus has been primarily on polar bears, so I'm fairly new to sea otters, and I like the warmer temperatures it brings. So thank you. And then I will kick it over after this sort of discussion on the Kachemak Bay tagging work over to Caroline, my colleague, to talk about the health assessments and what we've been finding with the straining otters. So with that, I thought I'd just give sort of a general overview, like I said, on some of the research that we've been having in Kachemak Bay here over the last year or two, and then talk about a little bit of what we've learned to date, and then sort of our next steps going forward and how you can help. So before I start talking about that, I thought it'd be good just to talk a little bit about the population in Kachemak Bay, just to give a little bit more of a background. And so aerial surveys have been conducted in Kachemak Bay in various years, and they tend to be done as a single engine fixed wing with a single pilot and just only one observer. And so they fly these transects here that are all kind of color coded, counting otters and pups, and coming up with population estimates. This map's pretty busy, and it's meant just to give you, just a general idea. So these are survey results from the latest survey conducted in 2017 with our colleagues at US Geological Survey, or USGS. And so each of these dots here are a sea otter location. And so it's kind of hard to see, but the green dots are sea otter pups, and the red dots are subadults or adult sea otters. And the larger the dot, the larger the group size. So just in general, you can see Kachemak Bay tends to be a bit of a hot spot. So looking at the last 5 years, or 5 surveys, I should say, 2002, we've definitely seen an increase in the number of otters in Kachemak Bay. So, if you just look at the abundance estimates, you're like, well, 2012 and 2017 look roughly the same. But if you actually look at the density, there was, we surveyed less in 2017 than we did in 2012. And the otter density, so otters per kilometer squared, has actually increased in the last 5 years. So generally speaking, in Kachemak Bay right now, there's roughly 6,000 otters, and the numbers seem to be increasing in the last few years. The sea otters present a very novel challenge when using technology to collect data. I kind of consider them a monkey of sorts, like they can groom all parts of their body, and so they are constantly grooming, and if there's anything on externally, they'll take it off. And so we're pretty limited in what we can do as far as technology and keeping sure that their coat and everything like that is in good condition. So we have to rely on internal tags. And of course, this can be somewhat invasive. And so the current technology for internal tags are quite physically demanding in the aspect for folks. And so we have to constantly be tracking them, or, you know, in the current tags for diving, you have to actually retrieve the tag to get the data off of them. So it's pretty labor intensive. So in the sea otter recovery team, made up a number of different individuals and entities, we decided that one of the primary goals that was needed was to be able to develop tags that we can then get these vital rates from the otters remotely. And so we don't have to be on the ground constantly monitoring these animals. 2014, we've teamed up with USGS, Fish and Wildlife, and then Monterey Bay Aquarium to develop these new tags. And so the developer is actually with the Alaska Sea Life Center, Dr. Marcus Horning. And so we've developed these internal tags that collect temperature data, activity sensors, and then that way we can understand reproductive rates. We can also understand causes of mortality, so end-of-life events. And so he's been developing these, Dr. Marcus Horning, since 2014. They were successfully deployed in California with 2 prototypes. And so we were testing them out here in Kachemak Bay here starting last year. But this was a big effort. And so all these people involved are from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, USGS, here in Alaska and in Santa Cruz, and then also USGS in Madison, Wisconsin.
I recognize one of the guys in this picture. Luke.
Which one?
Luke in the front in the green jacket.
Yep, yeah.
He,
Yes.
He stayed in our cabin last summer when he was out there working on that project.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Luke is our technician, and he's still on board. Yeah, so he's still bopping around in a boat out there. Yeah. So the whole project sort of falls on this proof of concept. So we want to make sure that these tags work properly, and so we wanted to be able to have eyes on them to make sure that what data it was collecting internally was actually what was actually going on with eyes on them in the boat or aircraft, which I'll talk about a little bit. And then the ultimate goal is to, once we verify all of this data, is to deploy these tags in the far western Aleutians to see exactly what is keeping that population down. So they've been consistently low numbers out in the western Aleutians, and we just don't know what's going on. So 20 of these tags were deployed in adult females here in May of last year. And so that thing that looks like a pink pill, that is the life history tag itself. So those were deployed in the otters. The otters were live captured with USGS folks doing live capture work. They were brought to a boat where we had set up sort of a mock surgery room. They were put under and monitored, and within 45 minutes they were released. So it was a pretty quick procedure. And then of course we also took a suite of other samples, blood samples and stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. But specifically, so these tags are pretty unique in the fact that they capture body temperature. And so what we can understand from that is when a sea otter gives birth, their temperature drops quite a bit. And you'll see that here later. And so you can see birthing effects, or events, I should say. And then there's an activity sensor in there as well. And so this is aimed at understanding what is the cause of mortality. And so things like violently shaking. We can maybe relate to a predation event like an orca, or if you see sort of this long pause, no activity, you know, it could potentially be natural mortality. And so that's sort of what we're looking at for the activity patterns there. And then the light sensor, there's an internal sensor there, and once that tag comes out of the body for whatever reason, if it was sort of chewed on and spit out, or you know, the animal deceased and it came out of the body, then the light sensor turns on and it starts transmitting that data. So we don't actually need to be in the field to collect that data. And yeah, so far it's been working out really well. Like I said, we've had folks in the water tracking these animals, and this is the second year. COVID has definitely changed things up a little bit, and we were hoping to consistently monitor these animals for this 2-year period, but that hasn't quite happened. We did have boats in the water constantly tracking these animals last summer from May to August, and then we were able to get Luke and a new technician, Madeline Welch, out in the boat, and they're tracking now July and August. And so to date, we've gotten about 400 locations on these 20 animals, and that's roughly anywhere between 12 to 25 locations per animal. So there's definitely quite a few differences in individuals and their patterns, so it's pretty interesting to see. When we can't be in a boat, we are doing over flights, and so we did that here in this past fall into winter, and then we had this sort of gap, and we just started picking that up here in July. And so we've been able to get location data in the opposite months of the boat-based. And so what we've seen is these 20 otters that we captured. We've actually had 8 new pups to date, so that's great. And so the map that you're looking at here has green and red dots, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to see, but the green dots are actually from the fall and winter versus the red are the spring and summer. So you can see there's definitely seasonal changes there. A lot more sightings in Tucka Bay, for example, in the winter. The other thing to note is that we've had 4 mortalities to date, and it primarily occurred, I would say, more or less this winter. January was our first one, and then we had another one 1 week later in February, again in March, and then the most recent one was in June. And so from those activity sensors, we've been able to tell that 2 of them have been predation. One of them is unknown. We were unable to recover the tag. And then one of them was a hunter harvest. So in understanding these tags, we've been working with local landowners, much like the tribe, and really appreciate it, to deploy these base stations. And so twice a year, the tags actually turn on internally, and we were able to deploy these base stations in a close proximity to be able to download the data while the otter is in the water close by. And so we've worked with a number of landowners to set up 6 different base stations, much like this one here pictured. And this one actually has 3 antennas on it. And so you can see the 2 antennas off the top, and then it looks like a rod on top. That's actually different. It's a highly sensitive antenna. But we've been exploring different antennas and different setups with the intent of trying to figure out which one works the best, which one has the largest radius to pick up an otter. And so far to date, we've sort of honed in a little bit and have gotten quite a few successful data downloads from otters just swimming by. So really help us figure out, as far as in the future, what what equipment works the best. And then all of that is stored. You can kind of see these little boxes at the base there. The data is then downloaded and stored on those boxes, and they're only up for about a week. And then we'll come and retrieve it. Data will be there, and we can, yeah, analyze it another time. So, but yeah, it's been hugely successful, and that's because of all the great landowners that have allowed us to access their land, and appreciate it. So going back to, we have had 4 mortalities, and we've been able to retrieve 3 of those tags. This one was retrieved here this past March in Tucka Bay. You can see it blends in pretty well, but if we're able to retrieve a tag, you get much more data off of that tag than it just transmitting via. Retrieving these tags is great. It gives us more data, but it's not essential.
That picture that you just had up there that was on the right with the hand next to the tag, I feel like I've seen that picture before. Was that on a flyer that was letting people know what to look for, and if you find this, this is what you should do with it?
Yep, that's exactly it. Yep. Yeah, so we do have 1 tag that's still out there floating somewhere. Last we got a transmission off of it is north of Port Gray. Someone does stumble across this tag or a tag, yeah, that would be great if you could let us know, because the data's all on there, and we can get it off whenever we get it back. So, yep, you did see that picture.
So what should we do with the tag if we happen to find one?
Give it to Steve.
Should we pick it up and return it to them, or just make a note of where it is and then let somebody who we all know where
Yeah,
it is?
I think yep, I think it's up to you. I mean, you can pick up the tag, and I'll show the flyer here at the end and give us a phone call, or you can just tell us where it's at and we can go get it to you, whatever you're comfortable with.
Just want to make sure for procedure and such, so.
Yeah, thank you. So this is an example of one of the tags that we did receive, some of the output of what it looks like. And so the temperature is collected every few minutes internally. And so here you can see this increase in temperature in the body, and that's the ovulation period. And so roughly 7 months later, then she did give birth to a pup here, which we were able to see from an aerial survey as well to confirm. So you can see that quick drop in temperature, and that's giving birth, and then it sort of increases at the end, and we're not sure exactly what happened. This is the one that was retrieved in Tucka Bay. We didn't see a carcass or exactly when exactly she died, but we're trying to figure that out, and her activity dropped off quite a bit, so it seems like it was a natural mortality. Here's just another example of some of the data that we received. This one again, a different otter. You can see that quick drop in temperature during giving birth, and this otter was harvested, so her activity was normal. So strep bacteria has been a big concern in Kachemak Bay for a while now because of the large die-offs that occurred in 2015. And you kind of see these sort of waves. And so the good thing is, since we had live otters in hand versus dead otters, we were able to do sort of a baseline health assessment. So what qualifies as a healthy otter? And so we were able to do some blood tests, run some bacterial tests, and we're hoping to get that manuscript out here at the end of this year. And I'll send that out for everyone to review and look at. So the next steps for the life history project. So we have folks in the field now. Luke, they will be monitoring from the boat here until the beginning of September. And then we'll also have a fixed wing, and that's one of these two planes that will be doing roughly, I would say bi-weekly, more like once a month, probably, aerial oversights. So you'll probably see one of these planes in the so in addition to all of this work, you know, we're hoping to produce a number of manuscripts, not only on the life history tags themselves, but also looking at seasonal distributions and home range and movements within Kachemak Bay. And then also there was a tagging project that was done by Angie Doroff in 2007. And so comparing those two years and seeing if the movement patterns have changed between the two time periods, especially when in 2007, the numbers, the sea otter population numbers were quite different. They're lower, to see if there's any differences there. And then also producing something on the baseline health assessment there.
It's a date.
Yeah, that's the flyer.
I can't even. That's something.
So here is the flyer that you mentioned. Yep. So yeah, if someone comes across one of these tags, it'd be hugely helpful to let us know. That would be great. You know, you can email me or Caroline or call the 800 number, and yeah, that would be great.
And I believe Michael and Stephen had offered that if, you know, if it was easier and more convenient for them to do retrieval, that, you know, our environmental department could aid and assist with that. Because you guys are in communication a lot anyway.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yep, I appreciate it. Yeah, and so of course, you know, this project couldn't go on with a number of folks, you know, and including the Soldovia Native Association. So we appreciate that, and getting land access and everything like that for those base stations. So it's been hugely important. And I think, you know, feel free to contact myself. You know, William Beatty is another one of our colleagues too, who's been involved in this project. So, and I'm happy to hand over this PowerPoint too as well, if that's helpful. So with that, I'll pass it over to Caroline, and I'll try to stop sharing.
Hi guys, just give me one moment. Let's see. You guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for inviting us to participate in your Healthy Otter or Healthy Chatter luncheon today. My name is Caroline Cummings. I'm a wildlife biologist with Fish and Wildlife Service based in Anchorage. I'm originally from Arizona, but I've been in Alaska for a little over a year now. I mostly work with sea otters for Fish and Wildlife, but beforehand I worked down in California with USGS on southern sea otters before coming up here. So I know you recognize Luke. You might have seen me as well working last summer out in the bay with Luke tracking otters and other fellow teammates. You know, we come into town sometimes, have dinner, get coffee. We went to the Salmonberry Festival last summer, which was really fun. Definitely missing the field work, and I wish that I could be there in Soldovia today and do this in person. But hopefully we'll get to do a visit sometime soon. So today I'm going to be speaking about sea otter health and disease, which the Fish and Wildlife Service monitors through our sea otter stranding program. So the purpose of the sea otter stranding program is to coordinate response to both live and dead stranded sea otters and UN for unusual mortality events from all over the state of Alaska. We could not accomplish our goals without the help of many volunteers, students, interns, and community members. Also, a network of the Alaska Sea Life Center is extremely instrumental in this work. They take in calls about stranded otters, coordinate with local responders, and help assess and capture live stranded otters. This is Maddie. She's a longtime sea otter responder, and she's out on a call at a beach in Homer. She also is now in the field doing work too, so you might see her, recognize her as well. So basically, this is just a huge cooperative effort that wouldn't be possible without our partnerships and the help with responders like Maddie, who assist in carcass disposal, data collection on the carcasses, monitoring of sick live stranded otters, of animal rescue efforts. Additionally, we work with training volunteers and students. And lastly, Fish and Wildlife also authorizes the capture, rehabilitation, and transportation and ultimate placement of non-releasable otters, and sometimes euthanasia on a case-by-case basis. So this is something that maybe you can help out with. If you do see an injured or sick sea otter, you can call the Alaska Sea Life Center hotline, or as I'm sure most of you guys know, right there in Seldovia is Michael Orfheim, who is the environmental coordinator for the tribe. He's highly experienced in working with sea otters and a great point of contact. If you see any local strandings, he's helped us quite a bit in the past. So if you do see a stranded sea otter and you want to report it, some things to take note on are physical characteristics of the otter, its behavior, normally, does it look normal or not? Are there any obvious injuries? Is the animal alone? Where is it located? Pretty much the more details, the better. It's also important to keep people and domestic animals away to reduce stress to the animal until a responder arrives and can assess the situation. So this slide, as you can see, there's a couple phone numbers you can contact or emails. Okay, so what does abnormal behavior look like? Sometimes it might be hard to tell. So I'm going to show you a video of what behavior might look like, even though it can sometimes be subtle. So that otter looks like maybe it's just resting, right? But if you look at this otter's right hind leg, sorry, this is an adult male from Tutka Bay last summer. So he appears to be, holding up that right hind flipper kind of in a different way than his left hind flipper. So maybe that indicates there's some sort of injury. If you look at his abdomen as well, it doesn't look like he's been grooming properly, and his fur looks quite wet, especially in comparison to his, fluffy head. So if an otter is not grooming properly, that likely means something is wrong. I'm sure, as you guys know, sea otters rely on their thick fur coats for warmth. So improper grooming might put this animal at risk for hypothermia. So the otter on the left-hand side of the screen is the same guy from that previous video. So because of that injured hind leg, he couldn't properly dive or forage. So here you can see him pulling mussels off the piling. So he's kind of going for easy food items while he's, trying to get through this injury. On the right-hand side of the screen is a different otter that is hauling out on the beach. I think that's somewhere on the spit. There's an arrow. It's a little bit hard to see. So otters do sometimes haul out to rest, and that can be a normal behavior, but if this is something that you notice, it would be a good idea to keep an eye on the otter and check to see if it appears to be injured or sick. So both of these examples would be a good otter to call into the hotline and to maybe get a responder out to the scene and do an assessment. So just a main program overview. So our objective is to monitor trends in sea otter health and mortality and identify threats or anthropogenic impacts that may warrant further management action. So we go out and collect data, which is known as level A data. So it's collected in the field on all sea otter carcasses, and this includes information on demographics, geographic location, and morphometrics, as well as any information that might stand out as a human interaction, such as entanglement in a fishing net. It's also important to note if there's more than one otter or perhaps other wildlife that may have stranded in the same area. It's because that might indicate that something bigger is going on in the environment that we would want to know about. So if we come across a carcass that's fresh enough, ideally we'd like to send it for necropsy and a full pathological investigation to the USGS National Wildlife Health Center. Samples from each necropsied otter are sent to the University of Alaska Fairbanks Museum, so that way they can, these tissues and samples are accessible to other researchers. Some of these samples include teeth, which we can use for aging, vibrissae, heart, liver, kidney, and muscle. So from these samples, we can assess diet composition, connect genetic analyses, and assess disease or contaminant exposure in tissues. We also currently have a partnership with National Marine Fisheries Service. So we provide urine, feces, and stomach content samples for biotoxin monitoring, such as domoic acid and saxitoxin that are produced by harmful algal blooms. And you may have heard about that occurring in Kachemak Bay. Lastly, the stranding program also works with the Fish and Wildlife Marking, Tagging, and Reporting Program, or MTRP, to gather information on any unusual or diseased otters that are harvested from native hunters. This is just what our level A data sheet looks like. And this is what our responders or volunteers and techs might take out into the field and go out and collect this information on the carcasses that they find. So we hope to facilitate the sharing of information concerning the cause and significance of sea otter mortalities across Alaska to help inform questions regarding ecosystem health and processes, as well as continue interagency and community partnerships. And finally, we hope to support and collaborate on research projects and ideally get publications and reports out into the broader community. I'm just going to go over a little bit of some data from 2019. In 2019, we had a total of 64 carcasses that were collected through the Stranding Response Network, primarily from the South Central stock and specifically Kachemak Bay, where there are more people and therefore a greater response effort, especially on Homer Spit, as you guys can imagine, where there's lots of tourists and activity. So this is likely due to increased visibility on well-trafficked local beaches. There's more people walking around to spot stranded otters and make phone calls. But it also could partly be because the population is doing so well here, as Michelle previously mentioned. So we might also simply be seeing a density-dependent response. The higher numbers of animals will naturally lead to increased mortality levels. The spit may also serve as a catchment for carcasses in the bay. There's very little infrastructure and fewer people in southwestern Alaska, like the Aleutians and other remote regions, so that makes it quite challenging to find carcasses or sample animals in those areas. So in general, we are lacking in health data from these areas. There is by far a bias of information in the South Central stock of the sea otters that is just more accessible and logistically feasible to obtain samples. So here's our 20, ooh, someone have a question?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay, sorry. So here's some of our 2019 stats. So overall, there was an adult male bias. 2019 causes of death. So we had 64 cases total. 13 were necropsy by pathologists, Wildlife Health Center. The primary causes of death were septicemia due to streptococcal infection, which Michelle also mentioned earlier. That just seems to be persisting in the population. Trauma such as boat strike. We had a case of drowning, a case of dystocia, which I'll get into, and lastly, a case of starvation. So here's the interesting dystocia case from a pregnant adult female, number FW19033. She was found in Seldovia. So the cause of death was attributed to a fetal abnormality that resulted in dystocia, which led to uterine necrosis, peritonitis, and septicemia in the mother. You can see the abnormal position of the fetus. The head and upper body of the fetus was found in the left uterine horn, while the tail, feet, lower body were found in the right uterine horn. The middle back of the fetus, which you can see looks bent, was present in the uterine body. So on the right side of the screen is an X-ray that shows abnormal formation in the spine. And just a shout out to Michael Orfine again, because he helped us collect this interesting case. And in general, it's not as common that we get females. As I noted in the previous slide, we tend to get more adult males. So we always try to make a greater effort to, if we have a female stranding, to pay attention to that and make every effort to get that sampled. Okay, so this is a little bit more fun. We had 2 live stranded pups in 2019 that were transferred to Alaska Sea Life Center and then homed in other aquariums. This is Cinder. She's named for her rescue that occurred during last summer's fires. So the roads were totally blocked due to the fires, and so she had to be flown out. And the pilot that flew her decided to name her Cinder after the fires. So there she is with the Sea Life Center staff on her way for rehabilitation. So unfortunately, I know this is it's tough, you know, to see pups like this, but when they're this young and they're separated from their mom, they wouldn't survive on their own. And so rehoming them is the best case scenario for positive outcome. With that, I would like to acknowledge all the many helpful partners that we have. This work would not be possible with the help from numerous people and partnerships, so I would like to acknowledge them and say thank you. And if there are any questions, we can answer from Michelle's presentation about the life history study and population numbers, as well as health and disease. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much. And if Caroline, if you can stop sharing your screen, and they can actually see you a little better and see Michelle a little better. There, see everybody.
Hi.
So does anybody have any questions? I thought it was really interesting. I was going to ask about the temperature thing, and you guys answered all my temperature questions. You showed the ovulation. That was one of my questions I was going to ask is, can you track breeding patterns as well with ovulation? Because I know you can in humans with temperature. And then I was wondering too, since that mother that passed was only a month postpartum, if it was possible that her death was attributed to some postpartum complication. Is that what the theory might be that you guys thought as well?
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. And yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't until the tag actually came out that we were able to track it down. It would have been great if we were able to track down the carcass to do a necropsy. But yeah, I mean, that was definitely a thought that crossed my mind as well. And so because of that sort of temperature increase that you see, that continues on throughout towards the end. So yeah.
And also I was wondering about, and I think you also just talked about the harmful algal blooms, and that's because a lot, if I've been listening really well to these guys, Stephen and Michael, ocean acidification and the rise in temperature. So how does that rise in temperature also, are you seeing a trend in their overall rise in temperature, or is it affecting them in any other ways other than the exposure to the harmful algal blooms?
That is a good question. Caroline?
Oh, do you mean like, are you talking about in terms of the like history tag, or like from the temperature it's recording, or sorry,
I
if you
guess
could.
just in general, is the rise in temperature affecting the population as in lifespan and so forth? So I guess that is the life history tag type of thing.
Well, so as you mentioned, increased temperature is more favorable to some of these harmful algal blooms that produce those biotoxins like saxitoxin and domoic acid, which can have fatal effects in numerous species. In terms of, so, of course, those toxins are getting into their prey source and they can be ingested and affect the animals that way. But in terms of direct effects of temperature, so we talked about a little bit about sea otters rely on their fur coat and not blubber for warmth. So I would think that warmer temperatures would actually be favorable for thermoregulation for a sea otter if you're talking about direct effects, but indirect effects on potentially prey movement or other things from their, in their habitat that might change, like kelp forest availability or that kind of thing that might indirectly impact them, I think is what is more at stake with the higher water temperatures, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I was going to ask too, did you guys, were you involved at all when Dr. Frederick Olivier was out here and doing the sea otter study that she did, what was that, 2 summers ago, 3? I don't know, a couple of years ago, there was a group that was out here and they were, they had the spy cam that they did out in the bay with the sea otters, and she's also been like embedded with penguins and things like that. So she's done a lot of scientific research, and I'm not really sure what the results were of the research that they did. I know they had like a little clip of that was on BBC, and I'm not sure where else it was. I have it somewhere, I can't remember now where it was, but did you guys collaborate with her at all when she was in town working on that project?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I heard about it, but I don't know too much about it.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the spy cam. Is that like something they can set up just in the environment, or does it have to be?
They had a fake otter that was to look like a real otter and to like float out there with the raft and use that to take to get up close photos and observation of the raft from within. And
I think I have heard of that. I have not been involved in a project like that though.
Okay.
Sounds cool. For
Yeah,
behavioral
I don't know how much. Yeah, I think it was more of a behavioral than a study of the biology side of things. But I'm not really sure, and so that's why I was wondering if you guys have been able to share data or if that had been beneficial or helpful to you. I have her contact if you guys ever want to just reach out and find out what she learned and share information.
Yeah.
But sure. I know brought a huge crew in, and some of the photography that they got from that was really beautiful. But I just didn't know how much research went into that and what they learned from that endeavor.
I'm not sure. I mean, if there's a publication out about it, we probably,
I'll see what I can find
At
and I'll
some
shoot
point.
your direction.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I have a question for the folks in the room, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I guess I was kind of shocked how quickly we had 2 predation events this winter. And so I was just kind of curious on everyone there, what have you seen an increase in orcas or around the area in the last few years, or has anything changed recently that you guys have noticed?
I'm gonna let Stephen answer that question. I think he's probably the most.
I think from what I've seen, yeah, there's been a huge increase in the orcas around Kachemak Bay for sure. That's what I hear from people too.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm
Very
not a scientist, and I just have observed that from people's discussions and lots of pictures and, you know, lots of Facebook posts about people riding the ferry and seeing pods of orcas, and Baco's water taxi reporting pods of orcas. So I don't know, you've lived
There's a
here
lot.
probably longer than any of us. Do you feel like there's been an increase?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I even heard one story about orcas over in Sadie Cove, picking them up off the beach, actually like Gresham Beach.
Wow.
Someone working out at the lodge, they had a group of kayakers up there, they saw that. Which I don't think happened in like one place in the world.
Yeah.
We should set up camera traps.
Yeah, study the orcas in conjunction with the otters and find out what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, huh? And is it seasonally that they're coming in, or are you guys just seeing a general increase like all throughout the year?
Again, this is just my recollection and observation, is I feel like July, August seems to be when we've seen the most people ranting and raving about all the orca sightings. So I don't know if there's, I do feel like we were seeing them earlier in the season though this year, like May and June maybe even.
They've been here a long time this year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. It's
And the
interesting.
otters are cleaning out our clam beds.
What did you say?
The otters are cleaning out our clam beds.
Yeah, they do love clams. They eat a lot of different types of invertebrates too. That's just my statement. They eat lots of things. But that is really interesting about the killer whales. And I don't know, Michelle, maybe you can see if anybody's got current work going on with those guys, that pod that's in there.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look into. Yeah.
I'm not sure who's tracking those. Do you know if there's an organization that's tracking the whale pods? That's surprising to me, as prevalent as they are, that they're not being studied and researched as well.
Yeah, well, I'm sure someone's doing something. Maybe collaborate. But
It'll be you guys by extension here.
yeah.
Well, thank you guys so very much. Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts about it? Would you guys be willing to share your PowerPoint presentations? Just email them to me and then I can share those also onto the Healthy Chatter website.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Page, I guess, but yeah, Facebook group. So that would be great. That way anybody that's wanting to go back and look at that for reference, especially because you've got so many phone numbers and website addresses that they can reference there as well. And if they weren't able to be here today, they can go back and check it out.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I'll do that right after this.
And then when you're able to be in town, please do let us know. And I'm sure there are people that would love to learn a little bit more face-to-face.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, we would love to come.
Yeah. Got here. Wish I was there.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
it's been a pleasure having you guys, and I look forward to hearing from you and keeping in touch in the future.
Likewise. Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you guys very much.
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.